The clock on my hotel bedside table in Chicago glowed 2:30 a.m. when my phone screen lit up with an incoming call from our family home. Outside, a brutal winter blizzard was howling, matching the sudden chill that crept into my chest. I am Clara Vance, a 35-year-old logistics manager used to solving complex, fast-moving crises. But nothing could have prepared me for the sheer terror in our housekeeper's voice when I answered. At 2:30 a.m., our housekeeper of 10 years called, her voice trembling. "You need to check your security cameras right now." I pulled up the footage and saw my stepmother and my younger stepbrother forcing my seriously ill, frail father to sign over the deed to our house for just $1 while he was too weak to resist. Staring at my phone screen in that dark hotel room, my blood ran cold as I watched the two people we trusted strip my helpless father of his life's work. The betrayal was unfolding live, and I was hundreds of miles away, determined to make them pay for every single second of his pain. If you believe that family should protect you rather than betray you, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. 5 minutes later, I was throwing my winter coat into my suitcase with my hands shaking in sheer panic. The howling Chicago wind rattled the hotel windows, urging me to move faster, because every second I wasted was another second my father remained defenseless. I threw my laptop into my bag, zipped it shut, and opened my airline application to find any possible way out of Illinois before the blizzard completely paralyzed the city. Every flight scheduled for the next morning showed a flashing red status of canceled or delayed. Frantically refreshing the screen, my eyes locked onto a single remaining option, a late-night flight departing O'Hare for Kansas City in less than 2 hours. It was the last commercial aircraft attempting to clear the runway before the airport officially suspended all operations. Without hesitating, I purchased the remaining business class ticket, barely caring that the last-minute fare cost hundreds of dollars. While waiting for a rideshare driver brave enough to navigate the ice-slicked streets, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and opened my laptop to secure the digital crime scene. My logistics training kicked in, overriding the emotional devastation of seeing my family turn into financial predators under our roof. I accessed our home's cloud surveillance system and began downloading the complete, unedited 3-hour history of the living room and kitchen feeds. My hands trembled as the progress bar slowly crept toward completion, but I knew these files were the only shields I had to protect my father's life. To ensure the footage could never be remotely erased by anyone else, I uploaded the massive video files directly to my encrypted cloud storage. Next, I forwarded copies to 2 of my private personal email addresses, securing the digital trail across multiple independent servers so no defense attorney could question the authenticity of the timestamps. With the files safely backed up, I analyzed the recorded footage in slow motion, zooming in closely on the interactions leading up to the forced signature. That was when I uncovered a detail so sinister it made my stomach turn with absolute nausea. My father, Ronald Vance, is a 68-year-old retired mechanical engineer who was diagnosed with progressive vascular dementia 3 years ago. Because of his fragile cognitive state, he relies entirely on a highly specific daily medication regimen to maintain his mental clarity. On the screen, I watched my stepmother, Virginia Vance, a 55-year-old woman who had spent the last 8 years pretending to be his dedicated caregiver, standing near the kitchen island. She was holding my father's weekly pill organizer, but she wasn't preparing his usual cognitive stimulants. Instead, she was deliberately swapping his daytime pills with double doses of his heavy, sedating neurological painkillers. I watched in horror as Virginia handed the small plastic cup containing the altered medication to my younger stepbrother, Clayton Vance, a 28-year-old who had never held a stable job. Clayton took the cup into the living room and practically forced my father to swallow the pills, smiling falsely while whispering in his ear. Within 45 minutes, the heavy sedatives took their devastating toll on my father's frail body. I watched the cognitive light drain from my father's eyes as his head began to droop heavily toward his chest, his hands becoming completely limp. That was the precise moment Clayton pulled the thick legal documents from his jacket pocket and placed a pen between my father's weak, trembling fingers. Virginia stood over them like a hawk, guiding my father's helpless hand across the signature line of the quitclaim deed, effectively stealing our family home, while he was too drugged to comprehend the betrayal. My phone buzzed with a notification that my ride had finally arrived downstairs, pulling me out of the digital horror show. I closed my laptop, grabbed my bags, and rushed down to the lobby, stepping out into the freezing Chicago air that felt like needles against my face. The drive to O'Hare was a terrifying crawl through blinding snow, but my mind was entirely focused on the digital evidence locked in my pocket. I knew I was flying into a legal war zone, and I was going to make sure I had every weapon necessary to destroy the people who had dared to abuse my father. At 6:45 a.m., my flight finally skidded onto the icy runway of Kansas City International Airport. The pilot had navigated through turbulent winter skies, and as soon as the cabin doors opened, I marched straight toward the long-term parking lot where my four-wheel drive SUV was buried under a thick layer of heavy snow. I cleared the windshield with frantic sweeping motions, turned the key, and listened to the engine roar to life, providing a temporary sense of control in a world that felt completely shattered. Driving down Interstate 35 toward Johnson County, the roads were treacherous, covered in black ice, and bordered by towering snowbanks, yet my focus was entirely locked on the road ahead. I knew that returning directly to our family estate in Overland Park would immediately tip off Virginia and Clayton, destroying the crucial element of surprise that I desperately needed. Instead, while stopped at a red light in Lenexa, I sent a brief encrypted text message to Agnes Gentry, our loyal housekeeper of 10 years, instructing her to meet me immediately at the Target parking lot just off West 119th Street. This location was usually bustling with suburban shoppers, but on this freezing morning the vast asphalt expanse was almost entirely deserted, offering the perfect, inconspicuous cover for our private conversation. Within 15 minutes, I spotted Agnes walking briskly through the biting wind, her winter coat pulled tight as she scanned the area before quickly slipping into my passenger seat. The moment the car door clicked shut and the vehicle's heater began blasting warm air, she burst into tears, her shoulders shaking violently with a mixture of terror and absolute exhaustion. I reached over, taking her cold, trembling hands in mine and offering whatever silent comfort I could muster while she struggled to catch her breath. "Clara, I was so afraid you wouldn't make it back in time." She sobbed, her voice muffled by the winter scarf wrapped around her face. I squeezed her hand gently, assuring her that I was here now and that we were going to handle this situation together step by step. She nodded, wiping away her tears with a damp tissue, her eyes reflecting the deep affection she held for my father after a decade of dedicated service in our household. Once she finally calmed down, Agnes gripped my arm and revealed a chilling piece of information that explained the desperate urgency behind their late-night betrayal. The previous evening, while she was organizing the linen closet near the guest bedroom, she had overheard a heated, frantic argument between Virginia and Clayton. Clayton was drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of sports gambling debt accumulated through illicit online platforms, and local bookies had recently threatened his physical safety if he did not settle his accounts immediately. Virginia, completely blind to her son's destructive habits, was willing to burn down my father's entire legacy to shield Clayton from the consequences of his financial ruin. The situation became even more critical when Agnes explained what had transpired right before they forced my father to sign the fraudulent document. She had watched Virginia and Clayton systematically ransack my father's private home office, breaking the lock on his antique mahogany desk to steal the original deed of the Overland Park house. They had hidden the stolen paperwork, along with a stack of bank statements, inside a locked drawer in Clayton's bedroom to keep it out of my reach when I returned. Knowing that the original deed was now in their physical possession made my blood run cold, but it also solidified my resolve to dismantle their amateur conspiracy. Agnes looked at me with deep concern in her eyes, warning me that Virginia had already contacted a local real estate agent to list our beautiful family home for a quick, cash-only sale under market value. They wanted to liquidate the estate as fast as possible to pay off Clayton's dangerous debtors before I could legally intervene or discover the transaction. I thanked her for her immense courage, assuring her that we were going to protect my father and reclaim everything they had tried to steal, no matter the cost. As I shifted the SUV into drive, I knew my next destination had to be a quiet place where I could safely plan our counterattack. By 9:30 a.m., I was sitting in the warmth of Sylvia Boyd's law office in downtown Overland Park. Sylvia Boyd, my estate lawyer, was a 62-year-old woman with silver hair and a reputation for defending vulnerable seniors from financial exploitation. I watched her carefully as I presented the saved security footage on my tablet, her professional composure remaining steady while her eyes hardened with quiet indignation. The contrast between the comfortable mahogany-paneled office and the chilling betrayal captured on my screen made the situation feel incredibly surreal. Sylvia did not interrupt the video, studying every detail from the way Clayton positioned the pen to the vacant, heavily drugged expression on my father's face. When the recording finished, she placed her reading glasses on the desk and leaned forward with absolute seriousness. "Clara, what we are looking at here is a classic case of elder abuse and fraud." Sylvia explained, her calm voice immediately bringing a sense of order to my chaotic thoughts. She analyzed the late-night signing, stating that executing a quitclaim deed for just $1 at 2:30 a.m., while the owner was severely incapacitated, was a blatant act of coercion. Under Kansas law, such a transaction would easily be declared a fraudulent conveyance by any court, because my father clearly lacked the mental capacity to understand what he was signing. However, Sylvia warned me that simply invalidating the deed on paper would not be enough to stop them if they were already attempting a fast cash-only sale of the estate. To build an airtight case that would completely dismantle their plans, we needed to gather immediate, irrefutable evidence of financial exploitation before confronting Virginia and Clayton. Following Sylvia's detailed instructions, I logged into my laptop to conduct an urgent, comprehensive review of all bank accounts connected to my father. For years, I had maintained a joint medical savings account with my father, a fund specifically designated to cover his expensive round-the-clock nursing care and future neurological treatments. As I opened the financial portal and pulled up the primary balance sheet, my breath caught in my throat, and a wave of cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The account, which had held exactly $245,000 just a few months ago, was now showing a devastating balance of nearly zero. I stared at the screen in disbelief, refreshing the page multiple times. But the empty balance remained, confirming that our critical medical safety net had been completely liquidated. We immediately began tracing the transaction history, scanning through pages of digital ledger transfers to uncover how such a massive sum of money could vanish without my knowledge. That was when Sylvia pointed out a series of recurring large-scale online transfers that had occurred over the past 4 months, all routed directly into Clayton's personal accounts. Each transfer bypassed the standard multi-signature security protocols because the system had processed them using a fully executed digital power of attorney. The puzzle pieces finally fell into place as I realized Virginia's incredibly calculating and devious strategy. She had manipulated my father months ago during one of his brief moments of confusion into signing a general power of attorney under the false pretense of managing his monthly medical billing. Using this sweeping legal authority, Virginia had silently altered the bank's notification settings to block all email alerts from reaching my inbox, allowing her to systematically drain the funds. She had spent the last 16 weeks funneling my father's hard-earned life savings directly to Clayton so he could pay off his aggressive sports gambling creditors. Sylvia sat back in her chair, circling the fraudulent transactions on her legal pad and assuring me that this discovery actually sealed their fate. The digital footprint left by these unauthorized bank transfers, combined with the midnight security footage, provided absolute proof of a coordinated criminal conspiracy. Armed with this undeniable evidence, Sylvia began drafting the emergency court petitions, but she looked at me and said, "We still needed one final decisive piece of physical proof to secure an immediate victory." At noon that same Tuesday, Sylvia and I met my cousin, Dr. Richard Vance, at the hospital. Dr. Richard Vance, my cousin and my father's attending physician, was a 38-year-old neurologist who had been monitoring my father's progressive vascular dementia for the past 3 years. We bypassed the busy public waiting room and met privately in his quiet office, where the sterile smell of antiseptic and the hum of medical monitors surrounded us. Sylvia wasted no time immediately placing her tablet on the desk and playing the downloaded security footage that clearly captured the midnight betrayal. I watched Richard's face closely as the video played, seeing his professional calm slowly dissolve into a mask of pure, silent fury. His hands clenched into tight fists as he witnessed Virginia and Clayton holding my father's trembling fingers, forcing him to sign the quitclaim deed. "This is absolutely monstrous, Clara," Richard whispered, his voice shaking with a rare combination of personal anger and professional outrage. He looked up from the screen, explaining that my father was in no condition to make any legal or financial decisions, let alone sign over his own home. He revealed that he had examined my father's clinical charts and medication logs just yesterday during a routine checkup, finding several highly alarming discrepancies in the treatment records. Virginia had been complaining to the clinic that my father was becoming increasingly agitated at night, which Richard now realized was a calculated lie to justify keeping heavy sedatives in the house. Seeing the video confirmed his worst clinical fears, showing that she had deliberately abused her position as a primary caregiver to chemically restrain my father for her own financial gain. To turn his professional outrage into an irrefutable legal weapon, Richard immediately pulled up my father's official certified medical records from the hospital database. He printed the comprehensive neurological evaluations from the past 12 months, which clearly documented my father's advanced cognitive decline and severe memory impairment. Furthermore, he highlighted the results of a routine blood panel that had been processed just 48 hours before the midnight incident occurred. The toxicology report showed extremely elevated levels of the prescribed neurological painkillers in my father's bloodstream, confirming he was heavily over-medicated during the time of the signing. Richard explained that under such a high chemical dosage, my father would have experienced extreme drowsiness, confusion, and a complete loss of willpower, making it physically and mentally impossible for him to offer any resistance. "There is no court in the state of Kansas that will accept this signature as voluntary or legally binding," Richard stated firmly, his medical authority adding immense weight to our case. He agreed to immediately draft and sign a formal legally binding medical affidavit certifying that my father completely lacked the mental capacity to execute any legal contracts on that night. This sworn document, bearing the official hospital seal and Richard's professional medical credentials, would serve as our primary weapon to block any attempted sale of the estate. Sylvia took the freshly printed documents and carefully slid them into her leather briefcase, a confident smile finally appearing on her face. With this crucial medical evidence secured, Sylvia explained that we now held all the cards necessary to completely paralyze Virginia and Clayton's plans. She planned to file an emergency petition with the Johnson County Court for a temporary restraining order to protect my father's physical well-being and freeze the property deed. However, before presenting these documents to a judge, Sylvia suggested a highly strategic move to corner the fraudsters and force them to reveal their hand. We needed to schedule an emergency meeting at her office under the pretense of discussing my father's future care, allowing them to walk right into our trap with their fraudulent paperwork. As we walked out of the hospital into the cold winter air, I felt a profound sense of relief knowing that the truth was finally documented in black and white. 2 days later, Virginia and Clayton walked into Sylvia's conference room with smug smiles on their faces. Sylvia had arranged this emergency meeting under the pretense of finalizing my father's future care arrangements, a calculated move to trap them before we officially filed civil and criminal charges in court. They arrived accompanied by a hired local attorney, looking as if they already owned the entire block, completely oblivious to the trap that had been set for them. Clayton sat down heavily in his leather chair, leaning back with an arrogant posture that made my hands clench beneath the heavy oak conference table. Virginia immediately began complaining about the freezing winter weather outside, acting like a devoted wife who was simply trying to resolve a minor family misunderstanding. She looked directly at me, her eyes dripping with fake sympathy, as she took a seat opposite mine, clearly believing she had already secured her financial future. Their lawyer, a sharp-suited man who seemed eager to wrap up the meeting quickly, slid a folder across the polished table toward Sylvia. Clayton reached into his coat pocket and tapped the table, his smirk widening as his lawyer spoke on their behalf, presenting the quitclaim deed. They confidently pointed to my father's scribbled, trembling signature near the bottom of the page, claiming the transaction was entirely voluntary. The document officially transferred the complete ownership of our beautiful Overland Park family estate, valued at $1,500,000 to Clayton, for the ridiculous sum of just $1. With an air of absolute triumph, Virginia looked at me and demanded that I pack up my belongings and vacate the premises within 30 days. She claimed that my father wanted Clayton to have the house and that my presence in the home was only causing unnecessary stress to his fragile health. I remained completely silent, letting their arrogance fill the room, while Sylvia slowly took off her reading glasses and smiled at their attorney. Instead of arguing or showing any signs of anger, Sylvia calmly pressed a button on her desk, lowering the automatic window blinds and switching on the large high-definition monitor mounted on the wall behind her. The screen flickered to life, showing a sharp, crystal-clear playback of our home living room bathed in the dim blue light of that fateful night. Virginia's smug smile instantly froze as the video played, showing her standing over my father while Clayton forced him to swallow the double dose of heavy sedatives. The conference room became so incredibly quiet that the only sound was the shallow, rapid breathing of my stepmother as she watched her own criminal actions broadcasted in high definition. Sylvia paused the video on a crystal-clear frame showing Clayton guiding my father's helpless, trembling hand across the signature line of the document. Then, without saying a word, she slid a thick stack of medical files and laboratory reports across the table, directly to their stunned attorney. Sylvia calmly explained that these were the official hospital records and a certified toxicology report provided by Dr. Richard Vance, my father's neurologist. The reports proved with absolute scientific certainty that at the exact time of the signing, my father was severely overmedicated with dangerous levels of prescription sedatives. Sylvia read aloud from Richard's signed medical affidavit, which certified that my father completely lacked the mental capacity to execute any legal documents on that night. The smug expressions on their faces vanished entirely, replaced by a sudden terrifying pale color as the reality of their situation set in. Their attorney looked at the medical affidavit, then at the frozen video frame, and slowly closed his legal pad, realizing his clients had committed a massive fraud. Virginia tried to stammer an excuse, her voice rising in a desperate pitch as she claimed she was only helping my father, but the undeniable evidence left her completely speechless. Clayton slumped forward in his chair, his previous arrogance evaporating as he stared at the screen, realizing his gambling debts were the least of his worries now. They were completely cornered, trapped by their own greed and fully exposed for committing systematic elder financial abuse under the very cameras they had ignored, leaving them with absolutely no way out. 3 weeks after that freezing night, the double doors of the Johnson County Courthouse opened for our hearing. I walked into the warm, quiet courtroom wearing my professional attire, sitting directly next to my father, whom I had successfully removed from Virginia's toxic control. Dad looked remarkably peaceful, resting his hands in his lap, while Sylvia sat on our other side, reviewing her neatly organized legal folders. Across the aisle, Virginia and Clayton sat with slumped shoulders and pale faces, their previous arrogance completely shattered by the impending weight of the law. The Honorable Judge Peterson presided over the bench, reviewing our extensive digital exhibits, including the clear living room video and Dr. Richard Vance's medical affidavit. When Judge Peterson delivered the final ruling, his voice was filled with deep, stern authority that echoed through the silent courtroom. He officially declared both the $1 quitclaim deed and the fraudulent power of attorney completely null and void under Kansas estate laws. The court recognized that my father had lacked all mental capacity during the midnight signing, making the transaction a clear act of coercion. Furthermore, the judge stripped Virginia of all her legal guardianship rights and completely severed her from my father's future estate and inheritance. To recover the stolen funds, the court ordered an immediate permanent freeze on Clayton's personal assets to reclaim every penny of the missing $245,000. Finally, Judge Peterson forwarded our entire case file directly to the district attorney's office to initiate criminal prosecution against both of them for grand theft and elder financial abuse. The legal victory was absolute, and I made the firm, unyielding decision to cut off all communication with Virginia, and Clayton refusing any attempts at mediation or family reconciliation. In the weeks that followed, Clayton faced the harsh reality of the American justice system receiving a felony conviction that ruined his credit, while Virginia was forced to liquidate her personal accounts to satisfy the court-ordered restitution. Meanwhile, I focused my energy on securing a safe, happy future for my father, moving him into a premium luxury memory care facility located in a quiet, sunny suburb. In this beautiful new environment surrounded by compassionate medical professionals, Dad spent his afternoon sitting on the warm patio, his mind finally at peace. With the reclaimed funds successfully restored to our family accounts, I immediately set out to fulfill a deeply personal promise that had kept me going through this dark journey. I drove to Agnes's small, modest home in the neighboring town, holding a thick manila envelope that contained the most important paperwork of her life. Agnes opened her front door with a look of surprise, immediately inviting me inside out of the chilly afternoon air. I handed her the envelope, asking her to open it, and watched as her eyes slowly scanned the official bank documents. Inside was a certified mortgage release form, proving that I had paid off the entire remaining balance of her home loan in full, securing her property forever. Agnes gasped, her hands shaking as she clutched the paperwork to her chest, tears of sheer disbelief and gratitude flowing down her face. "Clara, I cannot accept this. It is far too much," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion as she looked at me. I stepped forward and hugged her tightly, telling her that her courage had saved my father's life, and that no amount of money could ever repay her 10 years of true loyalty. We stood in her quiet living room, crying together in the comforting warmth, sharing a profound sense of peace, because justice and honesty had finally won. This journey taught me that those who try to build their happiness on the pain of others will always see their greed collapse under the weight of the truth. I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you who stayed until the very end of our story, showing your support for my father's fight for justice. Please take a moment to share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below, as your voices help build a community that stands up for the vulnerable. Thank you so much for listening today, and please take care of yourselves and the ones you love.